Welcome to another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line podcast. I've got my buddy from the gym, Mr. Jeremy, you say Baumann? Baumann. No, there's no O. It's Baugh.
Commonly mispronounced, even by our own family. But yes, Baumann.
Good German name. And Jeremy comes to us today to talk about his main gig, which is corporate security consulting. Yes, I was trying to spit that out in one smooth word. But you've got a big, long life before that I think makes you very suited to that job. So we'll kind of weave in and out of that. So you're, just to kind of paint a picture, currently your company, CSA, you specialize in developing strategies for security for big organizations, yes?
Correct.
If we swat at a fly during this, don't get mad at us. Without going too deep into it right out of the gate, hospitals, large organizations hire you to kind of look at like the big strategic overview of security. So we're not talking about like security guards at the front gate or something like that.
Correct. Yeah, more the strategic planning side. If you use the analogy as we sometimes do about building a home, we're more like the architect and general contractor.
Well, I like that.
And that's...
You're not the plumber, you're not the gutter guy.
No, but we can refer you to a good plumber. We can tell you who the best HVAC organization is. So we help build the program, help set it up so that you've got the right services in place. You move from being reactive after things happen and only being able to respond to moving to what we call intelligence-led, more proactive security, where you're actually stopping bad things before they happen. And that's really
like the Minority Report.
Not like the Minority Report.
Damn it, that would have been cool.
It'd be great if we could predict everyone's bad thoughts before they had them and stop them.
You're not allowed to have that thought. Before we dig too deep into that, just so people, because there's a million security companies out there.
There are.
I've got 20 Green Beret SEAL buddies that have security companies. I just talked to one yesterday, Jeff Houston Protection Services, excellent dude. They do like security for high net worth individuals that need somebody to stop bad things from happening to them. Or our friend Todd Fox that does work like that. And I'm sure like he could sit here, either of those guys, and probably dovetail into your conversation quite well, but there's a million things that they're like, oh, I don't do any of that.
Right.
And on the flip side, you don't have guys that follow around rich dudes to go on shopping trips.
No, we focus purely on the strategic, the planning, the assessments, building the programs, and more on what we call the business side of security.
Okay. You're a farm boy of sorts.
Yep, country boy.
Started out life in rural America, and you became a police officer, a sheriff's deputy.
I did.
Okay, so just like we'll paint a little picture of your youth. That way, as we're talking about who you are, we kind of get an idea how you ended up where you is.
Yeah, no, I mean, typical childhood. I was the first generation not to grow up in the country. We always lived in the back of a subdivision, right on the edge of the woods.
Backed up to freedom.
Yeah, and my father grew up in the country. Whole family was farmers, country people, and I was always irritated that my father had made the decision to move into town to start a family. He always pointed out the fact that he felt so lonely growing up. He didn't want his kids to have the experience of not having not having friends to play with. So he felt like it'd be a better life for the family. And, as the firstborn of our family, I was like, I want to go back. Like, take me back out to the country.
It's always like that way too, right? Like, I want to get out of the city because it sucked, the noise, the pollution, and then somebody else, the complete opposite. That's And we always like want to give our kid the thing that we didn't have and stop them from. I grew up in the country. I loved it. We I just talked to a friend the other day. I mean, we spent our summers with a fishing rod over the handlebars, and we wouldn't see parents until well after sundown many nights.
Well, and that was the nice thing about where I grew up. I grew up, in a town of about 2,000 people. And because I backed right up to the woods, I could disappear into the woods and I could walk, for hours and never see anything other than more woods.
I like that.
And so that's what I spent most of the time until I was about 10 years old. I was just out kicking around in the woods. And then at 10, we moved to a different place, actually built a house, which was a fascinating experience to go through as a 10-year-old boy.
Helping dad?
Yeah, because he had some of the work done, had like the framing and the brick masonry done. Had a buddy dig the hole for the basement and do some of the grading, but through that experience we did all of the rest of the work, and I got to be right there alongside all of that. So
those are good memories.
Yeah, the guy who dug the basement would put the dozer in gear and let it drive down the road in this neighborhood, and he would follow it with the straight truck that was loaded with dirt. And at the end of the road, he would park the truck and jump out and jump on the dozer. The neighbors wound up complaining about this driverless dozer going down the road. So my job at 10 years old then, when I got home from school, was to sit on the dozer so that it was not driverless.
I mean, that is pretty scary.
So as repayment for that, he taught me at 10 years old, how to run this little dozer.
That's fun.
So running equipment became something that, I've always enjoyed. So I've got my own collection of tractors and UTVs at the house that I love tooling around in.
Play some farm games out in the backyard. You got into rodeo.
I did.
How'd you do that? Why did you do that?
Again, country lifestyle growing up was always, where my head was at. And my group of friends was into horses, into rodeo, and it gave me the opportunity to try it. And it was, it was really fascinating. It's such an interesting sport, dangerous, certainly, but I mean, there is nothing like the rush of adrenaline settling down on a bull in a rodeo shoot. And to be fair, I mean, I did it as an amateur, just kicking around county fairs in the local area. But such an interesting sport. Had to give that up when I became a police officer. It was too easy to get busted up and too hard to keep a job as a police officer if you were busted up. So transitioned into team roping at the age of 21, and would go around and do little jackpot ropings with the friends. And
what's a jackpot roping?
Yeah, it's where basically everybody pays their entry fees, and the entry fees fund the winnings. So it little informal ropings that they would have.
Make a few
colleges.
$100 and
yeah, and so I would
cover the fuel bill to get out there.
I team rope, and you're talking like if you won, you might make $75, $100, and you're talking, almost 30 years ago at this point. So
that's not enough. That's not enough for that kind of abuse.
Well, and I will say team roping was not an abuse. I mean, it was more team roping. If you've made a car analogy, it's more like drag racing. It's very short, very fast. I was a heeler, so you're running out, catching the steer's heels to back legs, and then dallying off. So, it's a less than a 10-second run. Let's just go fast on a horse, swing a rope.
You think that those cows like that?
I never really thought about it from whether they liked it or not. I think there's an aspect of it of gaming. I mean, the cows they've got protective wraps around their horns, and they're getting caught around the feet. So, like, hell, we'd stand around and play games where we roped each other by the feet, and so not much different than that, I would say.
You guys would do that, he's drinking beers, whipping ropes at each other's legs and stuff?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds like a good time. What could go wrong? Would you be trying to get away?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the goal
There
is
was a
to make the other
specific
person
game. I'll
miss.
get me a rope and
Get
you
you
can
a
show
rope?
me how to do it.
I'll next time I think of it, I'll grab a rope at the house and
Okay.
we'll show you how to play.
Yeah, I would like to do that. So you become a sheriff's deputy, and you did that for a while in the area that you lived in. That kind of set you on the path to what you're doing now?
It did. It did. You know, and where I was a cop, it was very rural.
Okay.
And, you know, so, you know, working in small towns, and over my time, I worked for a couple of different departments between my full-time gig and part-time gigs.
Okay.
But I might be working in a town as small as 500 people. The sheriff's department I worked for, you know, county that was over 40 miles wide, over 30 miles north to south, and there might be 3 of us covering that area during the time that you're on duty. So a lot of rural policing, but it was where I wanted to live. It was, you know, I didn't want to go to the big city. I didn't want to be a big city cop. I wanted to do law enforcement where I wanted to live. Mm-hmm. So
something I hear, you know, guys will say, oh, those guys have it easy. Nothing goes on out there. But the stuff that goes on, you're the only one. Like,
yeah, I mean, you're working without backup. So you've got to be, and, you know, the night I got jumped, I was by myself. Like, there was nobody, there was no option. Like, you've got to be able to handle yourself. And it's the only time in my career I called for 1078 assistance, which is emergency backup needed. And, you know, I was still on my own for, I think, almost 10 minutes before the first.
So if you as a cop hear 1078, you're like, oh crap, I gotta go.
That's everybody goes.
Okay.
That's like if you're at your house and you've got a radio on and you're in the middle of dinner, you
Jump up and take off running.
Take off running without even getting your clothes on. So yeah, that's like somebody.
You don't say
die.
that because you can't get your Pepsi open.
No, well, and in fact, that was my mistake, and that was a formative night for me for a lot of reasons. But you know, I know this will shock. I was fairly anal about, you know, learning my 10 codes and using my 10 codes.
The reason that he says that is because I constantly rib him. If you go to his home or his office, and you know, in here everything looks fairly neat because we film in here, but out there could be a mess. You go into his office and everything is just so, and I'll go in there and turn things, and I know that he walks in and he can smell a book has been turned or a magazine. But anyway, I'm sure that's what you would want to know these things. So at night you would probably sit or on your off time memorizing them.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just, you know, I had them memorized before I even got hired and
knew them all.
Started. Yeah, I mean, you're in that profession, you're on the track to
quiz me, Sarge. Do it.
Keep
going. Don't stop.
But that night I called for another unit, and I used the 10 code 1018, which is quickly.
So 1018 is not as important.
Right. I just said, you know, my call sign, and I need another unit 1018.
Okay.
Just trying to keep a really even voice so that the people I'm dealing with don't read anything into it. And the individual that was my closest backup didn't know what the code was.
So he
was about 20 minutes away.
Oh.
So he's like, crap, pulls his car over. And I'm obviously not learning any of this till later. Pulls his car over, goes to the trunk because he knows he's got a 10 code card somewhere in his bag in the trunk, and spends like 3 minutes rummaging around for the 10 code card. And then the time that elapsed, we went from a verbal situation to a situation where these two guys cornered me and physically jumped me. At which point I made the 1078 call, which he did know. Got back in the car.
That one, you know, like we all know 10-4.
Right.
So you guys had memorized 1078. So let's go back. How old were you? 20 something?
Yeah. Yeah, early 20s. So I would have been 23 at the time, probably.
You play sports in high school?
Football, wrestling, little bit of college before or a little bit of soccer before
Okay.
high school, and some club ball in college.
So you were a sturdy young man, couple 100 pounds of lean cowboy bronc busting machinery, and you're
Bull
probably whatever. And I'm sure you were a total hard ass cop too.
You know, it depends on the arc of my career. I softened over time, but yeah, I think it's not unusual for new guys to be hard.
So you're alone and you have to stop these guys, or tell the story. It's a great story.
Yeah, so it started off, I thought I was making a DUI stop. It was about 12:30 in the morning.
Okay.
Friday, Saturday night type situation. And this van comes like jerking through the intersection in front of me, slamming on the brakes, nosedive, and accelerating rapidly and slamming on the brakes. You could tell it was just somebody was not able to put the right input into the controls.
Okay.
Right?
That's funny.
I wind up pulling traffic on the car.
What's that mean?
They're just pulling the car over.
Oh, okay.
Putting my emergency lights on, initiating the traffic stop. And the van just stops right in the center of the traffic lane.
Oh.
It doesn't pull over to the right like you would normally see. So things are already, like, there's already a lot of stuff.
You didn't give him the pull to the side of the road.
No, just
It's the middle of the night.
walked up alongside. I look in. The girl driving is very young.
Like not old enough to drive?
It appeared to me that she was not old enough to drive. Yeah. So before I did anything that verified that, I asked her to pull the vehicle off the roadway into an adjacent parking lot that was right there, of new business that had just started up. And so we moved the cars out of the roadway into this parking lot. And that's where I went up and started interacting with the girls. Turns out they were like 14, 11, and 10. They had been on a camping trip with mom and mom's boyfriend, who had proceeded to get blind drunk and pass out. And so the 14, 11, and 10-year-old girls decided they were going to take the van and leave and try and get somewhere.
Rescue themselves from this drunk idiot.
Yep. So
I forgot this part of the story.
yeah, it was interesting because, then you go for, like, it's not, you're dealing with a juvenile issue. And so the main point is to make sure that the girls are safe. So I've got to get somebody to come take the vehicle. I've got to, take the girls into protective custody. And so I'm in the middle of trying to deal with all this.
What time of year is this? Was it warm out? I guess if they're camping, it was probably warm.
Yeah, this was been like a springtime.
Okay.
The phone in the van rings and it's mom calling. So I decide that I'm going to answer the phone in the deepest, gruffest voice that I can muster, and said hello. At which point mom starts literally screaming. So when I explained to her who I am and that I've got her girls in custody, to bring a sober driver and to come here, and told her that if she showed up drunk, that I would promptly arrest her and the night would get even worse for her. We got that part of the situation sort of moving towards a resolution. So I go back and I'm dealing with the girls, explaining to them what's going on, and a vehicle pulls up. Now keep in mind, by this time it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm in the parking lot of a closed business. We had just gotten notice to do after-hours business checks on this new business. And the vehicle pulls up, and so I walk back. I make contact. I say, "Hey guys, I'm on a traffic stop. I need you to, head out." And they told me in not so polite words that they weren't going anywhere, and proceeded to get out of the vehicle. So I locked the girls in the back seat of the squad car, started dealing with these two individuals. I recognized one of the individuals who is, I think the technical term we would use is frequent flyer. And he was a habitual drunk driver. So I start asking him how much he's had to drink. And he says, very impolitely, how much he's had to drink. We'll keep it PG.
Very, very impolitely.
And tells me what he thinks of me and my profession. Long story short, I tell him to get back in the vehicle. Because he says I've had a boatload to drink, and there's not anything you can do about it because I'm on private property.
I've had a boatload.
Which is, I'm sure you're aware, being on private property doesn't matter for DUI. Even if I hadn't just watched the guy drive down the public roadway. So now I'm dealing with these guys. I'm dealing with the girls. I need another unit there, which is where the 1018 part of the story comes in. I asked for another unit, 1018, and then as the driver was getting back into the vehicle, he hadn't quite shut his door. And I heard him say, "Did you hear that, Dad? He needs another unit. He needs help." Dad says, "Fuck it. There's two of us. There's only one of him." And so they get back out of the vehicle and proceed to start to approach me
Flanking
from both
you.
corners. And I've got my back up against the building. So I just put the door handle right in the small of my back. And that's when they both just rushed me. And I managed to deflect one off, knock the other one to the ground, hard enough that it stunned him. I grabbed the first one, handcuffed him, and then Dad's picking himself up. And these aren't small guys. I mean, 5'11", 230, 6'1", 220 between the two of them. And so then Dad rushes me, grabs onto my uniform. I got a hefty shot of adrenaline, picked him up and threw him about 6 feet up in the air. He landed on top of a gas grill and just
6 feet, you think?
Well, I know because he landed on top of the gas grill and demolished it.
Wow, that's awesome.
Right? It was just like, I chucked him as hard as I could. He literally destroys this grill from
So
coming
you're
down.
not striking, you're just throwing, and you guys are just grabbing and yanking on each other.
Yeah, I mean, I never did throw punches in a fight. I was always trying to bring someone under control. I wasn't trying to strike back. I was trying to handcuff and bring them. People can soak up a punch.
Sure.
I need to bring you under control quickly. I need to handcuff you. So I am grabbing you as violently as I can if we're in that, and I'm going hands on, putting handcuffs on you. When Dad flew through the air, he ripped my lapel mic off my uniform, but I'd gotten out a 1078 call for assistance right before he did that.
Which we know means come quickly, I need help.
Yep. So we went to battle.
A handcuffed guy is done, or is he up with his hands behind him, like running his head into you?
Yeah, he's trying to get back to his feet at this point. I've got him handcuffed face down on the pavement. That happened really quickly. So you
got 2 sets of handcuffs on you?
I always carried 3.
Okay.
I got made fun of because I carried 3 sets of handcuffs, and there was more than one. Like some guys that carry a flashlight ring. I carried a set of cuffs up there and slipped a flashlight through it. And so I would have an extra pair. So I'm fighting with Dad. I wind up leg sweeping him. He goes down face first on the broken concrete and sliding for about 18 inches. I'm sure he still remembers me when he shaves every morning. But I jumped down on top of him because now he's face down. He hit the pavement pretty hard face first. But I'm trying to get his hands behind his back and get him in cuffs. And he's got his hands locked in front of him. So I pulled out an expandable baton to use it as a pry bar to get that hand broke loose. One of the few things those things were good for other than knocking on doors. But when I pulled the baton out and extended it, the kid goes, Dad, he's going to hit you in the head. And all of a sudden both arms come out. Like he didn't want to get thwacked. So I was able to handcuff him and got back on the radio and was like, hey, I've got 5 in custody. I still need a couple of units to help out, but everybody can slow it down. And nobody slowed it down. I could hear like guys screaming from multiple directions flying up, but relatively benign ending to what could have been a really bad situation.
You didn't take any permanent damage other than emotionally?
I mean, no, even like that's not an unusual night. Getting jumped was probably unusual. That didn't happen all that often, but getting in a physical fight that happened multiple times a week.
Really?
Go hands on.
Just drunk idiots that just didn't want to go to jail.
And there are a lot of folks who they're in the process of going to jail and they don't want to look like they're weak in front of their friends. So they will allow you to get one cuff on and then the fight starts. And, so you dealt with that a lot. Dealt with a lot of big guys who didn't want to get arrested by, anyone smaller than them. So they would fight me or fight someone else who was trying to arrest them. It wasn't an infrequent circumstance.
So understanding that, living through that, you kind of going back to where we started, you have an understanding of what the cop or security person, like down at the, I guess, micro level of security's dealing with some shithead in an ER or whatever.
Absolutely.
It's not just like numbers on a chalkboard to you.
No, I started at the bottom. That's, and honestly, that's where all the fun is. So when you're a young man and you're trying to make a positive impact on society, trying to do something good and useful, it's a fun job. You see a lot of stuff, but it's more difficult today. We were universally, at the time, you had a lot of public support for law enforcement when I joined. It was very difficult to get a job as a police officer when I joined. And, I remember I tested for one department that had a list that was 2,000 people long.
Damn.
And, that's...
Now they give those jobs away. Yeah.
Now they're trying to lower the standards just to be able to put a warm body out there.
See that video? Paul Sharp shared it. I sent it to a couple of guys. A younger officer, deputy, I don't know what kind of law enforcement guy he was. He had shorts on in the video. He gets into some kind of grappling match with a dude that's shirtless and kind of flabby. And ultimately it ends in this cop running away and the dude beating his ass and throwing him to the ground. Did you see that just in the last 24 hours? Yeah, it was like kind of the opposite of what you're saying.
Yeah, and we weren't without people like that at the time either. I can remember a specific individual, super nice guy, and but he became a police officer. He was very smart. He was physically fit enough to pass all the tests, but he was just small and thin and fragile might be the best way of saying it. And it just motivates guys to want to fight because you're dealing with somebody and they're like, I'm not letting you arrest me. And then, so you wind up, if you're not physically assertive, if people can physically dominate you, you just invite more physical altercations. So I personally, I don't think it's the right thing for people who can't be that physically assertive. And that's irrespective of height, weight, the type of people that you deal with who have the ability to hold their own. And
I have a really good friend. He's retired from our sheriff's office. He's a detective. We were just talking about his undercover days, and he had the long hair and looked like a dirtbag. And he talked, his dad was a Chicago copper who would always tell him, never go into their house, never get in the car with them. Like his father had rules for him, but he's a smaller guy, but a boxing fool. Like he was involved in all the boxing clubs and stuff. Super fit too, but he's probably, maybe 5'8". His name's Tom. Super stud. He's in his 60s now. Still very fit. But like, he probably got that, and he was the guy that probably jab him in the face real quick and told you to listen.
Yep. Yeah, and guys had different styles. Guys wrestling, boxing. They'd have whatever background. Some sports guys that just more raw physical strength. And people came from a variety of backgrounds and could handle themselves pretty well.
I met you through jiu-jitsu.
Indeed.
Heart jiu-jitsu, Alpha back in those days. How would that have helped you?
Jiu-jitsu would have been a game changer. For me personally, I never struggled just because of the wrestling background I had during high school. And to be clear, I wasn't any fantastic wrestler, but
you understood how to
just that grappling background.
Yeah, stay on your feet.
But jiu-jitsu takes that to a completely different level. So having that, it's something I think it should be mandatory for law enforcement.
You hear the old timers talk about wrestling and boxing clubs, and of course, like the bullseye leagues and the PPC stuff that, or
PPCT.
Yeah, thank you. It's just not like the thing, any of those things anymore.
Yeah,
which is weird. Seems like if you were going to do that job, you would want that skill.
Well, the PPCT, like
I was talking, PPC is the Police Pistol Club.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
different.
Yes.
Yeah. PPCT, I think, man, I'm going in the way back, like pressure point control tactics.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about that. I was talking about like just the guys that I knew all the old coppers that I knew that are involved.
Shoot competitively.
Yeah, they it might just be a bullseye league or a bowling pin league, but it was like, how fast can I shoot down this thing, or how fast can I shoot the 10 hits to the bullseye? Or I used to go to Michigan once every couple months. It was a little police pistol club. They were like IDPA style matches. They'd have a couple targets with no shoots and stuff. It's funny enough, it was in an old pole barn that had like no ventilation. And there'd be like dudes back here at folding tables, smoking cigs. And you're just like kind of shooting out the open end of the barn into the forest. It was pretty fun. Yeah. They'd shut the lights off and you'd be guys that have their flashlights.
You don't hear about it as much as you used to your point.
Yeah.
It seemed like everybody, you might have some guys you worked with who, they love martial arts. I have some guys you work with who love to shoot, or, but now I don't know. I don't know if that's as common today.
Well, how many guys train with us that are coppers? Maybe a dozen now from different departments.
Yeah, it's hard with all the classes we've got to keep track of everybody that's training, but there are I would say 15
out of the 1,000 or 1,500 sworn guys in the region. Though it still seems like I know some of them maybe go to a different gym or have some different skills, but something that comes up, you've seen it, is like maybe, and I don't want to pick on anybody, but some of you know who you are. Some of them, they look a certain way, and then they'll come in, and then not even muscular Jeremy or some other stud. It could be some nerd that's 8 months of training, Kanan's not a nerd, but he's a 150-pound kid. He'd climb up on dudes and just, kind of shrink around their face and suffocate them, and they did not like that. So then they don't show up anymore because they don't want to look less than.
Well, you get two types. Either when they have that experience, they know they have to come back to fix that problem, or they never want to come back again because they can't stand the embarrassment.
Z, one time, you've met him. You guys know who Z is. He had some dude manhandle him, 25 years ago, and that was him. He's like, I will not allow that to ever happen again. Like, I do not like how that feels, and I will not allow that to ever happen again.
People are one of two types, and actually it's fun because, we get new guys come into the gym, new cops come into the gym. Like, they don't know me. They don't know what I used to do. So we'll be rolling around, and as I'm holding them down, I'll like to whisper in their ear, like, you can come home and tell her that I held you down.
Yeah. I love messing with those guys too. But to your point, some of them say, okay, this is important. I had that guy, I've told you about him. He came to a class out on the West Coast a few years ago, and he ended up killing a guy in a struggle. the guy basically got on top of him and was just beating him and then ripped his gun off of him. And now they're fighting for the gun. And he was able to get control of the gun enough that he discharged it through the guy's midsection, and he expired immediately on top of him. And he was so exhausted from the struggle that he laid there till help got there to get the corpse off of him. And he since began training. He's probably a purple belt now. That was a long time ago, but he carried a lot of remorse because he said, had I had some knowledge, I might have not had to kill that guy. You know, I'm not a cop, but I just said, you did what you had to do. That guy put himself there, not you.
One of the training officers that I had, this guy was complete stud, a former Force Recon Marine in Vietnam. He was, multi-level black belt, and what was he? Aikido, maybe? He was still very able to handle himself. He fought a dude that was over 400 pounds one night. And as a deputy sheriff, they would issue us these 36-inch hickory riot batons.
Oh, sure.
He was fighting this guy in the wintertime, and actually took his gun off and threw it in a snowbank.
Just so that it wasn't part of the equation anymore.
Right. He wasn't sure if he could take the guy, but he was fairly certain that if he was wearing a gun, the guy could rip it away from him, and then, the fight would obviously turn lethal at that point. He broke that 36-inch hickory on that guy.
Beating him.
Yeah, like snapped it on him.
Wow.
But it ultimately took like 5 or 6 guys to bring that guy
multiple humans to stop him. At that point, I mean, the whole idea of the gun is there for a reason, but he didn't want to shoot him, apparently.
No, I mean, and every guy's got to make that call. Like, if, obviously, just like the story you told, right? You don't go out there to take a life, and it's a last resort.
This is before tasers existed.
Yeah.
Did you have pepper spray then? Mace?
I had pepper spray. I carried pepper foam at the time.
Okay. Did you have good results with that? I know some guys from that era didn't like it.
I hated it. The part of the story that I kind of glossed over.
With the two guys.
Yeah, I sprayed him.
Oh, okay. You didn't tell us that part.
Yeah, I sprayed him.
So before it got physical, you gave him a shot?
It was actually after I had handcuffed the first guy, before I got the second guy under control, threw him at the grill. As he came back up, pulled out the pepper spray and pepper foam, hit him with pepper foam right in the eyes, and he just looked at me and wiped it out and kept coming.
Damn it.
It's like, fucking chuck that as far as I can just to
get it out of the equation.
Get it out of the equation. So, yeah, I mean, I did not have any faith in it after that point.
Chuck Haggard, who's a copper in Kansas, I guess he's had a lot of deployments of pepper spray, and he said he's got many that have been like immediate, I surrender, and many where that same thing has happened.
I would say my results with it were 50-50.
That's not good.
No, I mean, you're using a tool that's going to work half the time.
And you've now introduced an irritant that can F you up too.
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive to it. It does not make me feel good.
And I was never that sensitive to it. So, it was a tool that I considered in an escalation of force. But it was always in the back of my mind that this can fail, and I've got to be ready to be able to go to the next level if this doesn't work, if this doesn't add, points on my side of the equation.
I got a lot of buddies our age and older, like from this sheriff's office, and one of them, he's now, I think, the most senior deputy there, age-wise, and time working. And he was telling us a story one night. He's like, when I started working here, which is probably 30 years ago, he said, if we showed up, like wherever in the county, people were like, oh, because not that the city cops didn't have respect, but like at the time it was like, shit, the sheriff's deputies are here. And like they came there to like not mess stuff up, but like if they're out here now, like, now they're here, some stuff's going to happen. And he said nowadays, people are just like, screw you, cop. But back at the time, he said if they pulled up, people often would just stop whatever was happening when they saw those dudes. Did you have that same experience?
Almost exactly the same. Yeah, the city cops, there's usually more of them around. So it changes the equation when you're dealing with those situations and you've got 3 or 4 uniformed guys with you, or gals, whatever it might be, from when you're by yourself. You have to have a much lower tolerance for things getting out of control, because you can get, you can let it go so far that you can't get it reeled back in. So I'm going to tell you once, and then it's probably going hands on. And so when you're working for an agency that's the way you have to work, because most of the time you're working by yourself. It changes the dynamic when you're involved in a situation. You handle situations that way. You get habituated to handle situations that way.
I didn't even think about that angle.
And we talk about it a lot now when we're advising large organizations on use of force, because there's a lot of, I think it's BS to talk about minimum force necessary.
Okay.
Coach Dan and I were having this conversation the other night. Use of force, a lot of the discussion is around, minimum force necessary, right? And I think that's the wrong way of thinking about it. We advise our clients that it's the wrong way to think about use of force.
Can you give me an example in the real world what you're talking about, so people listening and viewing understand what you're saying?
Yeah. So if we talked about it in the framework of the minimum force it would take me to pull you out of that chair and handcuff you right now.
Okay.
Right? What's the minimum force that I could potentially use for that? Well, if I grab you lightly by the wrist and, I turn, then we're in this constant battle of ratcheting up, slowly ratcheting up to where, if we wind up pointing a gun at each other because we slowly escalated all the way to this, whatever the minimum force was, I'm essentially letting you control that equation, because I'm trying to use just the slightest bit more force than you're willing to counter. And if I get to the point where I'm willing to use finally a little bit more than you're willing to use, then I will have won the engagement, right? And so it allows for this slow escalation in the use of force continuum that ends up resulting in more harm to more people more of the time.
So to the uninitiated, using what might appear to be more force than necessary might be the more merciful thing to do.
I talk about it, and my team that has experience in this talks about it in terms of minimum harm, right? If I have to take you out of that chair and handcuff you, what do I do to ensure that we do it efficiently, effectively, to cause the minimum harm necessary to you, to me, to any of the bystanders who might be around? And so I might grab you forcefully, and I might use verbal compliance first, and I need you to lay down on the floor, put your hands behind your back, right? When you show resistance and I understand that I have to go hands-on, I'm not going to be delicate. You have now been non-compliant. I'm going to forcefully take hold of you in such a way where if you start resisting, I know I can dominate that situation and put you to the ground. We see this a lot where...
He wishes.
That's for the viewers to judge. We see a lot of these situations where everybody's trying to be so delicate with hands-on, and it allows a situation to escalate out of control. And we advised a client in a situation where it was a healthcare security setting, and they're trying to get this individual to leave the property.
Okay.
So they keep like pushing him out the door, trying to get him to leave. And instead of, understanding that he's crossed the line and it's time to make this a different equation. And at the end of the scenario, because they keep trying to use a little bit more, the guy turns around and picks up a 6-inch rock.
Oh, crap.
And tries to throw it at one of them's head.
So it could kill him.
Literally, deadly force. They could have been justified then in shooting him. And I sat with the general counsel for that organization. I was like, do you see how this situation was allowed to get completely out of control because the use of force training that this team is using is around minimum force necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if conversely, they would have grabbed that individual, taken him down hard, put him in handcuffs, and taken him into custody, you don't run that risk because you maintain the upper hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so the net effect is minimum harm. And so the goal should not be minimum force. The goal should be minimum harm at the end of the day. And what do we have to do to make sure that we're doing everything we can to have the outcome be that minimum harm necessary?
I just saw I don't watch a lot of this stuff, but it was some body cam of a irate woman in Florida at like the sales office of a big condo. Her and her husband's holding a little kid, 2, maybe 18 months old. And she's just belligerent, yelling at them. So the staff calls sheriff. I think it's Orange County, Florida, where like Disney is. So the guy comes in, super polite, "Ma'am, what's going on?" And she's like, da, 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 da. And so the staff said, "Hey, she's been here for 4 hours yelling. We can't help her with what she wants help with, so we've just asked her to leave. Maybe in the future we can figure out how to help her, but she's disturbing everybody. She won't leave." So he does like 5 minutes of, "If I tell you one more time, if I tell you one more time." And the husband's just like mortified holding the kid. And so the deputy says, "Can you take your wife and leave?" He's like, "She won't listen to me." So finally it turns into, okay, one more time. Finally he goes to cuff her. And now she's, "Why are you hurting me?" And it turns into them walking her out and 3 guys. And she's a little tiny thing, but now she's flopping about and they get her subdued. And it, now she's famous on the internet, but you watch that and it's like, I'm sure in his head, just thinking about it from the way the world works, he's like, "God, I would love for this chick just to leave so that this doesn't turn into this thing where now I've got it's this big 6'2" dude with this little tiny lady, and then I'm going to be a jerk and people aren't going to understand." And like that dynamic has to be horrible, be it a security guard or a police officer or even just an innocent bystander. It's like people now game or play the game of, what you should have done or shouldn't have done without a broader understanding of the legal use of force or even the dynamics of 2 humans grabbing each other. Or, well, if he picks a rock up, commensurate response. Well, if you pick a rock up, I pick a rock up. Like, no, that's not how that works. Okay, let me get my rock. I got to find a good rock.
Where's my department issued rock?
Yeah. But you hear people arguing these things, and it's that would get in my head if that was doing that job.
Yeah, and admittedly, I never had to deal with that. I was moved on before we had to worry about the social media. There are departments now that they set policy formally or informally about how many times you've got to ask or how much time you have to spend talking to somebody who's non-compliant before you can go hands-on. I've heard all sorts of horror stories about things like that. We never had to deal with that. So
use your judgment. If this person's not listening to me and I feel I need to turn this into something else, I just do that.
Yeah. And I would say you use that as a last resort, right? The hallmark of a good cop is being able to talk to someone and get them to be compliant with your words verbally, right? Verbal compliance. And being able to talk with someone respectfully, to be able to sort of separate them from the situation, to be able to calm them down.
Damn it.
I don't know who's going to win. You or the
I want
fly.
that fly. I'm listening.
Those are the really good cops, are the ones who can have a conversation with somebody and take them from spiraling out of control to getting them to focus and, go on about their day in a much better outcome, with a much better outcome than getting arrested, going to jail.
Or even like the simple things like, well, not simple, but like things that we don't even think about. Blowing your shoulder out, getting tackled into the car, or losing your license, or all the other bull crap that comes with it. But you're dealing with people that don't think about all of that stuff.
Correct.
Yeah, that's the problem. So when you start to like dovetail this into broader security, I think the general public, we assume people have got all these things covered for us, right? Like, this building lights on fire right now. There's got to be systems and plans in place to make sure I'm safe. I just saw a video. I thought it was fake because it looked fake, but it was real. People are looking up in a Walmart at a skylight that looks funny, and then the whole freaking ceiling, like 30 feet in every direction, thousands of pounds of snow comes caving in. I mean, it squashes people. And so, here's a situation where you assume engineering, this thing's going to do its job. I'm sure it was some crazy snow load that was not planned for. And then, people are staring up at the ceiling, creaking and doing this. Like, my head would be like, I'm not going to stand underneath that. But the hospitals or these large buildings, here's a great example. My daughter worked for one of the largest amusement park companies. I don't want to say the name of it, in the country while in high school, and quit after about 2 weeks. And I'm like, what the heck are you doing home? Like, I quit. What do you mean you quit? They made me in charge of inspecting the XYZ ride. Now, I'd been on this ride, so I'm like, what do you mean they made you in charge of inspecting it? She's like, it was me and another girl had to inspect it. What were you inspecting? Like, to make sure like there was no popcorn in the seats? She's like, no, we were doing the safety inspection. This is a huge roller coaster. And these are like 16-year-old girls. So like, then you and I go there with our kids, and the people that have checked it are girls that just learned how to drive cars, looking at the bolts and nuts and grease and safety things that I don't know anything about. You or I could probably figure out if somebody gave us the checklist, but I'd probably take me 2 weeks, to go over the thing. So those things seem to exist all throughout our world, and we just take it for granted. And a lot of times in my head, the safety stuff is an afterthought because it costs money and it doesn't make money. It's not the sexy product. It's not the delicious steak that people are coming to a place for. So, talk about that a little bit, the economics of it all.
Yeah, I mean, so the economics absolutely play a role. Regulations play a role. But when you're talking about keeping people safe, if you're a retailer, right, you have an obligation to keep people safe. You have a legal obligation to provide a reasonable duty of care. There's premises liability, where you can be liable if you're not providing a safe workplace for your customers, for your employees.
So if I'm at the local business and something bad happens and I get injured because some crazy's in there doing something, or a roof collapses, there's some culpability for the property owner, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Or business owner.
The legal term is called premises liability.
Okay.
And, the ugly part is it gets into the lawyers like sorting out, what is reasonable at that point. So organizations have varying degrees of risk tolerance for how they put those safety and security systems in place. And so, part of our role is on the management consulting side is to help them understand how to think about it from a business perspective so that they can achieve the goal of keeping people safe, but they can understand making the investment in terms of how it's going to benefit their business. and probably more importantly, not make the wrong investments.
Okay.
Right. That we see that more often than anything else is people are spending money on the wrong things. They're spending money on the obvious tools that are more focused around figuring out what happened afterwards or responding to the bad thing than they are spending lesser amounts of money on the things that prevent the bad thing because they don't know that that technique or that way of handling things exists.
Okay. When we like as an organization starts looking at this analysis of risk, does it really come down to like, what's the odds of this happening and how much does it cost me to reduce this odd? Okay, that thing's so far down the scale, I'll just absorb this or accept this risk that the lawyers and payouts and insurance premiums is better for me to risk this thing than deal with this off chance roof collapse or bad guy driving a car through the front of the store and hitting a bunch of people eating their lunch.
The answer is every organization is different, and every leader in every organization thinks about it differently. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the job is to get the leadership team thinking about it the same way and making sure that they're well informed. And active shooter is the big one where, we'll talk to a management team and they'll be like, well, like, what are we going to do? Like, why would we put a program in place? Like, you can't stop it from happening. You'll hear things like that said. Or they'll say, well, we taught the run, hide, fight video. There's nothing else we can do.
For those of you not aware, the Run, Hide, Fight video is a very standard government-produced chunk of instruction that is like do A, then B, then C, and it's not very proactive. It's really probably the lowest bit of training one would have for that, if anything.
Yeah, I mean, so
it's better than nothing.
There's the government versions of the video. There's commercially produced versions of the video. The government video, the Houston, I think it was DHS and City of Houston put together a 6-minute video. And that one can be a little gritty. It's a little hard for some people to watch. I know that from testing multiple videos with multiple audiences in a corporate setting. There's a very popular video that's been around for probably 2 decades now called Shots Fired, put out by a group called the Center for Personal Protection and Safety that produce training videos. That video essentially educates people. A lot of people don't know what gunfire really sounds like. They hear it on TV, they hear it in a movie. And so when they hear it in real life, they don't recognize it for what it is. They'll hear pop, 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 but they don't associate it with gunfire. So they don't know how to react or what to react. So, that video starts off by educating people as to what to do if they hear something, what it sounds like, what real gunfire sounds like, some things you might equate it to, but then how to react from there. If you can run, get out, run out, get away from the sound of the gunfire. If you can't run, if you can't get out, then hide out. And it walks you through what that means. And then, as a last resort, you may be faced with the ultimate decision to have to fight an armed attacker.
Arm yourself with whatever's in your...
Exactly. Yeah. So, organizations will say, well, we did that. What else can we do? And the reality of it is, gosh, wouldn't it be nice to know about the attacker before it happened? If you're reacting to, all right, shots are being fired, or if you're relying on the big one now that everybody's going down the rabbit hole on is weapons detection systems, right? Every organization thinks they got to have a weapons detection system at every doorway. And the reality of it is, like, if you've got a hospital that has 30 entrances, even if you could afford to put a weapons detection platform at each of those entrances. You've got to close the other entrances. You can't let people come through the entrances where there aren't, or people are just going to go in. Then you've got the costs of staffing them.
Yeah, you got to have somebody there to read this data and then physically stop you.
Right. And so we will go in and we'll show leadership at organizations how those fail.
I think a perfect example of that is what just happened at that White House dinner with the Secret Service. They had detection systems and Secret Service and all the other coppers, and dude just quickly moved himself through the area, right?
I mean, we've been saying it for decades, like a weapons detection system, all that does, not decades, but years, like the weapons detection system just changes the starting location of, the event. That's really what it's going to come down to when you've got a determined individual. They're either going to use another entrance, or they're going to start shooting at that checkpoint, or they're going to try and run through the checkpoint. I mean, we've said that over and over and over again.
It or whatever the means of entry is. Yeah.
But
or pick a like you said, another way in that they can not have to fight their way in. Go ahead. I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, I mean, so what we advocate for is using intelligence to be able to stop those things from happening. I've had so many unfortunate circumstances happen at places I was responsible for over the course of my career now that, you learn the methodologies to be able to gather the information about the bad guy or girl before they show up.
Okay.
And so using technology, gosh, isn't it better if when the bad guy pulls onto the property, the camera knows that he pulls onto the property, calls up that this is a person who's on the list of dangerous people, and puts that up in front of an operator who's looking at a screen going, we just got a flag on John Smith and he's here. Now he's on camera. Well, if John Smith is showing up and has an appointment in the visitor log, that's one thing. If John Smith's getting out of his car and he's got a duffel bag filled with long objects that he's thrown over his shoulder, then it might be reasonable to believe he's got a gun in the bag.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go out and proactively deal with this out in the parking lot before he gets to the building.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ability to use that intelligence to stop bad things from happening, the ability to, if you've got a victim who's working at a particular location and you know about a situation, you can proactively create accommodations for that victim so that they're not working at a location where they can be targeted.
Yeah.
You can escort people to their vehicle. There's all sorts of things that you can do to reduce risk to the potential victim, to reduce risk to the workplace if you put them in place. Where most people default is and God bless everybody who leaves law enforcement and believes that when you immediately leave law enforcement, you know how to do everything in security. We have a lot of those folks.
I think what I just heard is that you have a little bit of some chafing from this idea that people run security businesses and they just think that they know all of it because they did cop work. Is that what I just heard? And that irritates you a little bit?
Well, it just causes so much harm. I can't tell you the number of organizations that go out there. They need security for their healthcare organization, for their business, and they go hire an ex-cop.
Okay.
Right? Because obviously, if you were a police officer, you know security. The functional equivalent would be to say that because I was a security guard, I knew how to do law enforcement's job.
Sure.
The two jobs are very different, and there are all sorts of specialized programs that you need to be really familiar with to be effective at that job. You need to understand how and when to use and deploy technology, cameras, card readers, when it's effective, when it's a waste of money. You need to know what programs are out there. You need to understand the legal environment, things like background investigations, the use of intelligence in the private sector. And one of our best clients, the relationship started off when they picked a firm, a couple of ex-law enforcement folks who had gone out, hung out their shingle as a security consultancy. And, the details surrounding the story aren't necessarily funny, but it's sort of a humorous way that, we were able to get in and help them. They wound up going with the low bidder for the security assessment. And I stayed in contact with the client over the next year.
I think I remember this story.
Yeah, it ultimately, I'm having a conversation with the client, and he had just had his security assessment done. And I said, well, I was baiting him a little bit, but like, you know what to do now. You got your security assessment back and you've got all the answers right there. He says, Jeremy, that's just the thing. Like after reading this assessment, I don't see how any of the things that they're recommending would have stopped what just happened. And I said, well, John, that's because, that report recommends more gates, more guards, more guns, more cameras. Right. And he looked at me like I was Karnak the Great reading through the closed envelope. Like, how did you know that? How did you know what they recommend? That's what every retired cop who hangs out at a security consultancy knows. That's the only tools they know.
Sure.
Right. So they go hang their shingle out. They can make a little bit of money doing this. But this organization now has a report saying they need to add millions of dollars worth of cameras, millions of dollars worth of weapons detection.
Wow.
Right. They were staring at a $30 million investment in weapons detection alone.
Holy crap.
But they saved $50,000 on their security assessment. Right. And so that's what we run into, is that there's so much bad advice out there. And that's really the difference with our organization.
Well, time out now. You were a cop.
Yes.
What the hell do you know about the price of security cameras in Chicago? You've got some education on it, right?
Well, so I would say that it's not that cops are bad, right? And I was a cop, right? It's how you come into the organization and who you have to learn from. My general advice to people coming out of law enforcement, and I do a lot of pro bono, just consulting, helping people transition out of law enforcement now into the corporate world. Folks are very interested in corporate security. They don't really know what it is or what it exists. I didn't either when I was exposed to it. It's a whole different profession with all different ways of mitigating risk that isn't available to law enforcement. And so my advice to coppers when they come out is don't go look for that job as the head of security. You just don't have the requisite skills, knowledge to be able to do that job yet. Go look for a job that you feel like might be beneath you a little bit, be willing to take a pay cut. Make sure that you're working for an experienced professional team or person who can show you what you need to know, right? But if you go in as the top guy, then there's about a 50% failure rate where people spend a couple of years and then they get fired because they're not able to be effective. They don't understand the business principles that it takes to work in an organization. They're used to working with a municipal budget. Very different from a zero-based budget, situation in a private sector setting where you've got to be able to go in and justify the return on investment for every dollar that you're spending.
That makes sense.
And so if folks who leave law enforcement take the time to find the right position where they can mentor underneath somebody, then you take that law enforcement experience and all the requisite skills and background that they've got from that job. You add to it now this ability to learn quickly underneath of a trusted mentor on a team that's highly experienced, and you put those things together and they'll shoot past everybody else out there. And so that's really the recipe for success and for folks coming out of law enforcement wanting to pursue a career in corporate security. And you've got to learn first. You've got to learn the right way, and it's just not a good assumption that things are the same from one job to the other.
You've got a pretty solid team. You've got guys from various three-letter agencies that are retired from that, so they've got backgrounds in the physical stuff that we're talking about, the physical security measures, as well as all of this technological stuff that you're talking about. But you got other people too. Talk about your team a little bit.
Yeah, so
I'm not trying to make this a sales pitch about your brand, but it is, I see so much of this stuff where what you're talking about, it is like, it'd be like me trying to build a skyscraper. I've got lots of construction experience, but I don't know shit about building skyscrapers other than plumb level square, that kind of stuff.
And I mean, it's a good analogy, right? The reason that we're able to be so competitive in the marketplace, and the thing that makes us different, is we are the only team comprised entirely of people who have demonstrated success in the private sector. And like you said, most of our folks came from the FBI, the CIA, local, state, federal law enforcement at the beginning of their career. But then they all went on and had successful careers in the private sector. They've got success in the boardroom, success with the C-suite, success building these organizations. And I mean, success is all about learning from your failures, right? Learning finally one or two right ways to get the job done, learning what works and what doesn't. It's not that it's the only right way, but how to get from point A to point B, how to build those programs.
How'd you find all these guys? How's a small town sheriff deputy from nowhere with nothing going for him, just a waste of life? I'm just kidding. No, how's it?
Not far off.
I'm just kidding. But how's a guy like, how does a kid from farmland that's a sheriff's deputy end up with dudes that were, and I know some of the answers, but it's a great story. Share on that a little bit.
I mean, like, the answer that I tell people is because I was like Mikey. I was the guy that everybody came to. It's like, oh, he'll do it, right? I never said no. When I got into the private sector, I had really, really hard work ethic. I was, everybody else was pencil whipping their inspections. At the time, I was overseeing, I think, initially 9 teams with over 100 people total underneath of me. And, you were supposed to be out interacting with those teams once per week per shift at every one of those locations.
Oh, wow.
And I covered from Springfield to Aurora. And so, you might put on 2,000 miles a week so that you could be every location at third shift, and every location at second shift, and every location at first shift.
Damn.
So it was a lot of miles, a lot of hard work. But, eventually, that earned me a job on the inside with the sister company of one of my client organizations. I was able to, we got integrated back, and I had the benefit of working now on this large global pharmaceutical corporate security team that, again, we were doing all sorts of things that I never even imagined. Everybody looks at security and they see the very visible part of it. They see the security guards. But like in pharmaceuticals, we had a product security team fighting counterfeit medicines around the world.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, so I started out in security operations dealing with what was most closely related to law enforcement, which was the uniformed security staff and overseeing them. One day, the team was drowning in investigations. Well, I had background as a cop. So our internal investigations team asked me to help out. Now I had to keep doing the rest of my job, but it gave me the opportunity to go in and start working on investigations. So then I literally over the next 24 months, I closed 100% of my investigations with by bringing evidence, bringing it to an interview and getting a full confession from, the individual in the wrong in that case. So that got me noticed. And, then I had some Spanish that I took in high school. and we were opening an affiliate in Mexico. And nobody wanted to go down there. It was 2008. The narco trafficking violence was off the hook. And, we literally had an individual on the team who was a Mexican citizen. He's like, I'm not going down there. And so they came to me and they said, hey, you willing to go to Mexico and set up a security program there? Sure, I'll go. Got to keep doing your investigations job. Okay, fine. So, did both. And so I started traveling to Mexico at the time, started setting up the security program down there. And, I did not let the job intimidate me. I started working with the regional security officer at the U.S. Embassy.
Oh, cool.
Started working with the FBI's legal attaché to build relationships in country, get to know the vendor landscape. Ultimately built the entire security program there and earned the trust of the leadership team to where they said, okay, now we've got to deploy a sales force in the 33 states in the federal district of Mexico, but we're worried that we're going to have people get hurt, killed, kidnapped, attacked. And so that was really my first opportunity to think about a business problem, solving it with security. So in that case, you've got a company that's got the entire pharmaceutical revenue for the entire country of Mexico that's hinging on my team and I solving this problem. How do we help the leadership of the organization do this in a way that's safe, that we don't put people at risk, that we feel comfortable about it? So that next period of time, I worked on the security strategy for the deployment of the sales force to Mexico. And we came up with a few key principles, like we're not going to move someone from a higher risk state or a lower risk state to a higher risk state. If we've got people in these higher risk locations, we're going to create their environment of employment in such a way that they are safer than they would be if they didn't work for us. We're going to put all the mechanisms in place so we can respond if we have someone that's attacked. We're going to do extensive training for folks on how to avoid it. And by putting all of these mechanisms in place, we were able to go to the leadership of this global pharma company and say, here's how you deploy a sales force in Mexico and make sure that you are doing a net positive in deploying the sales force there. So it allowed the company to proceed with that geographic expansion project. Right. Well, so now I'm traveling to Mexico, traveling to Brazil, traveling to Canada. My boss has noticed that, I've got a passport and I know how to use it. And so the next big thing that happened, it was 2010, and there was a warehouse burglary. Eli Lilly got ripped off for about $76.2 million of pharmaceutical product.
Damn.
The thieves broke in there on the weekend, spent 8 hours.
This?
What's that?
This was in the U.S. or another country?
This was in the U.S. This was in Connecticut. Broke in on a weekend when the warehouse was closed, spent 8 hours using the company's forklifts to load trucks and trailers.
Wow.
And hauled off product. Huge news. The FDA came out and issued a warning letter to manufacturers, April 28th, I think 2010, if memory serves, that basically threatened the manufacturers and said, regardless of where in the supply chain your product is, even if it's not in your direct control, you are responsible for the security of your product. And if you are not taking proper security protocols, there will be remedial actions taken by the FDA, up to and including full lot recalls for affected products.
Dang.
So when you think about how pharmaceutical product moves throughout the U.S. supply chain to get to your Walgreens or CVS pharmacy where you pick it up, it gets manufactured and it gets shipped out, into the supply chain. Probably goes to a cross-dock facility where it's combined with other pharmaceutical products, and then it moves on a truck and goes to a wholesaler, McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, right? Cardinal Health. These are huge wholesalers who then sell to end user pharmacies. Then they put together what Walgreens needs, what CVS needs, and eventually, the pharmaceuticals move through the supply chain. Well, if it's in McKesson's hands and it gets ripped off, or if it's in, ABC Trucking Company's truck and the truck gets stolen, you might have 30 lots of product on that truck that just have one pallet or one case on that truck, and you might have to recall all of that product. So you could literally be talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of impact from one theft. All that to say, the pharmaceutical companies were very highly motivated then to put supply chain security programs in place to be able to protect, so that pharmaceutical product wasn't being ripped off out of the supply chain, to being able to protect it from counterfeit incursion into the supply chain. Because at the time we were seeing that. There's a great book called Dangerous Doses that talks about how organized crime on the East Coast was stealing empty vials of cancer drugs from the dumpsters at these cancer clinics, refilling it with distilled waters, selling it to other doctors under the guise that it was coming from a Canadian pharmacy, because Americans almost universally believe that Canadian drugs are safe and cheap because of the Canadian government regulations. When in reality, if you're getting Canadian drugs, they're probably counterfeit.
No shit.
Yeah. It's a huge market. Now, there's been a lot of progress made since I was in the business. There's the Alliance for Safe Online Pharmacies. There's a lot of work being done proactively, but about 10% of the world's medicine supply is counterfeit. And so,
no idea. I'm thankfully not having to take any medicines, but that's a huge number.
Yeah, it is. And so, building up the supply chain security program, we were able to save millions of dollars. We were able to recover lost product that was being, without besmirching anybody, was being stolen by nefarious means, fraudulently. And when you're able to recover, millions of dollars worth of lost product, you can show a return on investment for having a program like that in place. That earned me the ability to roll that out across the globe.
Okay.
That earned me more responsibility to be able to take on a broader program. So we had a forensics lab that would analyze suspect product from around the world. I had a PhD scientist in the lab that worked on the team who was basically analyzing all of the suspect product, all of the packaging that would come in. We had strains of counterfeit pharmaceuticals coming out of China where we could tell it was literally the same printing press. And we could tell that they were making improvements in their printing over time.
Wow.
Because you could see the same defects over multiple years from this case to that case to this case. So again, not saying no to anything just led to, more responsibility. That was probably the most interesting job I had in my career. Ultimately got promoted again, because the organization needed a leader who could rebuild other parts of the organization. So then I started working on crisis management, business continuity, travel, event, executive security, our global security operations center that covered our operations in 76 countries. And from there, got recruited to go to another organization to sort of rebuild the program because the team had come over, benchmarked with us, and the leader of that team, when he got promoted, he actually brought me into the organization to rebuild that same thing at that new organization. And so, you basically start over again, building from scratch, all of those things, but centered around stopping bad things before they happen. That organization, one of the great success stories there, we prevented a suicide. Like, these are things that you don't think, when you start your career as a, rookie cop, that you think you're going to be working on in the private sector, or even that somebody would say, like, how in the world did you prevent a suicide? And just a lot of great opportunities to be able to make an impact, a positive impact in people's lives. We do a lot of work. Corporate security does a lot of work. When
you say corporate security, you're talking about your business, or are you talking about?
No, I'm talking about the profession broadly.
Okay, gotcha.
Corporate security teams do so much positive work. You think about a corporation, it's basically like a city or a town, right? You've got cities and towns of all sizes. You've got corporations of all sizes. And so if you're working for an organization that's got 17,000 people working for it, you probably got all of the same problems that a city that has 17,000 people living in it has.
Sure.
You've got the same rates of domestic violence. You've got the same rates of, random violence against other people. You've got the same drug use, theft, whatever it might be
Sure.
that you're dealing with, all things big and small. And so, that's what you're working on from a corporate security perspective. Big one is travel security. What really shifted, 9/11 shifted corporate security to much more of an intelligence-led function, because back at that time, the various terrorist organizations shifted to targeting Western business interests as they were traveling overseas. A lot of, if you go back to Inspire magazine at the time, the Al Qaeda publication was, they were publishing ways to make explosive devices, publishing ways to use vehicles to target, victims. Famous picture, I think it was like 2003. They had this big Ford Super Duty in an article where they were like, mow them down, drive over.
Remember that.
And so corporate security then had to shift to, okay, how do we keep our people safe? How do we evacuate our people from a location if we have to? How do we use intelligence to know what's the risk in that location? How do we think, is it okay to send people to Yemen? Like, do we really need to go? What's the risk of going there? And so we all had to pivot at that point in time to thinking about stopping those things from happening, not just responding, being good responders when the bad thing happened, but how do we keep people out of harm's way? Or how do we help them go into a dangerous environment and be safe? And it's not all security stuff, right? Half of the time when you travel internationally, do you know what the medical care is like in that country? Do you know how to get prescription medication if you need it safely? What do you do if you have a heart attack in a foreign country? Is it the same? So, we not only trained our employees what to do, in a business setting, but we also offered it to employees as a benefit so that they could leverage it if they were on personal travel. And then we had great leadership support at both the organizations that I worked at that had big international footprints, where we had an individual that had a heart attack in the Philippines, incapacitated. Wife found our card in his wallet, because we handed out wallet cards for everybody at the time, and called the command center, said, hey, what do I do? This is what's happened. So, we've got contracts with medical providers who are able to do medical evacuations. If you have a heart attack, you might not be able to fly commercial, right? That might not be medically appropriate or medically safe for you to do that. So how do you travel in that scenario? Can you even receive the care there that you would need or expect that would be on the standard that we would expect here in the States?
Right. All that stuff makes me think about, I buy this thing and this company has to keep the lights on and, pay the sales guy and pay for the dumpster out back and all that shit. But everything you're talking about has a cost that ends up in this product, to me, the end user. So when people see things, what did I see? Oh, I shared a picture or a video of a rifle, and somebody said those are great, but they cost way too much. They should cost half that. And I just asked, like, why should it cost that much? And I think sometimes that's right. Like, why should a dozen eggs be $20 or whatever it is? Part of it is it can be whatever I want it to be if I'm selling it, but I think we don't really have any people go into Walmart or wherever and they say, that's nuts. That barbecue grill should cost X, Y, Z. And we don't even fathom all of these costs, that 70-something million dollars. We generally, the public, just says, well, insurance pays for it. Everything's fine. My little puny businesses, I have insurance companies that audit us and say, how much money did you make? What stuff do you have that lights on fire and could burn your neighbor's house down? And then you owe us this much money every month. Damn it.
Yeah. And you see all sides of it in business, and, it's a natural tendency for people to want to pay less for goods and services. We try and boil everything down to a business case, right? And why don't you have 24-hour armed guards around your home?
Because it costs too much.
Right.
And because I'm probably better than them.
Certainly better than them.
I'm just
However,
joking. I would
right,
love to have that feature.
it like if
You'd
you had to
sleep very
spend 200
nice.
grand a year on having, wouldn't it be better security?
Sure.
Would you be bankrupt very quickly?
Sure.
Like, so there's that makes that an acceptable risk. Like the probability. Now, if you knew that, a team of, Navy SEALs was going to come assault the house, on Tuesday night, would you say, yeah, you know what? I'm going to pay for those armed guards, and I'm going to get the best armed guards. I'm going to hire, former
Berets.
Delta guys
Yep.
to come repel this attack, right? Because the business case now shifted in a different favor.
Based on the data and yep.
Yeah, so comical example, but we're making the same calculation for here are all of the things that could happen. Here's the probability of those things. Here's the impact of those things. And here's what it costs to mitigate that risk down to an acceptable level. And so we work with the management teams to go through that calculus to say, is it worth spending $30 million on weapons detection to change the location where the shooting might start? Because you're not going to stop the shooting. You're just going to change the location of it. And all of a sudden the risk calculus is, well, no, it's not. Okay, so why do we want weapons detection? What is the purpose of that?
It looks good.
Well, there is a case for it, right? If we say we don't want anyone to get into the emergency services, the emergency department, the ER, with a weapon, right? There's a high likelihood that could happen. Urban environments, gang fights, individuals from Team B wind up injured at the ER. Very likely that individuals from Team A know they're going to go to finish them off, right? So a lot of ERs have to be put on lockdown. We need to ensure that the ED has weapons detection in these high-risk locations. So let's make sure that you can't get into the emergency department without a weapon. Let's put the weapons detection where we're mitigating the probability and likelihood and impact of this to the greatest degree. And that we can say, yes, that based on what we know, we found 27 weapons in the ED last year. Then we measure it after we put the mitigation strategy in place. And we say, now we found 0 weapons in the ED afterwards. So we've saved this, we've reduced the risk by X factor.
What I'm hearing, listening, there is a multitude of things that we don't think about. It's like I saw some stupid video yesterday somebody sent me because I just basically live on social media. Some chick sets a pole dancing thing up in her living room, right? And she's filming herself like on a live stream that she's practicing this pole dancing, and it's not to be a stripper, it's like the exercise pole dancing thing. Well, she fails to secure the thing and it tips, but in tipping it tears the head off of the sprinkler, right? And it, of course, now there's nothing to shut it off, and it's just dumping 1,000 gallons a minute into the apartment or whatever it is. And it's hilarious because her cats are running around and it destroys everything. It wasn't fake. I thought it was AI at first. Anyway, as I saw it, I thought, there's a perfect example of this thing that we look at and we just have no idea, because most people never see a sprinkler head go off or get tore off. You have no idea of what actually is just lurking straight behind. You know what I mean? And kind of all the stuff you're talking about, we just take all of these different things for granted, the safety of the carnival ride or whatever. We just assume, not knowing that there's all of these things, and then all of these things are still humans doing it. So hopefully the humans doing it at your company or wherever are studious in their calculations and figures, and then the different layers have all these people implementing whatever they need to do. I mean, there's a lot of faith we put in this stuff.
Well, and I think that's really, that goes back to, I think, something that's core foundational for both you and me, which is that at the end of the day, you need to take responsibility for yourself and being prepared, being ready, being physically able to defend your loved ones, being able to look out for yourself, because all of these things that we think somebody else might be taking care of might be the case, or they may not be sufficient. And you may be in a situation where you do have to look out for yourself. So, and that's not just, everybody needs to be proficient with a firearm, or everybody needs to be, a black belt in jiu-jitsu. But I try and think about, how am I prepared in all situations? Whether it's, all of the cliche stuff, like knowing where the exits to a building are if you're in a strange building, or, do you have some basic tools in your vehicle to be able to deal with things if they come up? Are you, even if you're not mechanically inclined and you wouldn't know how to use the tool, have you thought through how you would handle situations? Right? Have you talked through with your family, if cell coverage goes down, how do we communicate? If you're 5 hours away, how would you expect me to get a hold of you? Like things like that just take 5 minutes to talk through, be prepared, take responsibility for your own circumstances.
I just read something, somebody, social media again, sent me for my opinion. And it was basically something that we agree on, but I like to look through comments. I know people always say never read comments, but comments are, you can see people's feelings, right? And so somebody's commenting, don't neglect your physical health. You got to be capable of, throwing somebody over a fence, carrying somebody, blah, blah, blah. And I totally agree. But then you read the comments and it's like, hey, buckaroo, I'm 78 years old, or I have diabetes that has taken my left leg, or I blew my back out, or I just had surgery. There was dozens of these comments, I'm a little lady. My husband weighs 260 pounds. I weigh 110 pounds. Only a fool would think that I would be able to drag him any distance. And so sometimes I think I'm not saying you suggested this, but sometimes we have this idea, and we both have fathers that are getting up in age that used to be strapping men, and as healthy as they might be, they're not our age and they're not 20. So it's, you start to rely on stuff, but even then you can still have that process going in your head to not walk yourself into quicksand.
It's funny. It shifts over time, right? And that's why the key is being thoughtful about your preparation. It's not about any one right answer that's the point I was trying to make with, not everybody needs to be proficient with a gun. Not everybody needs to be out there practicing knife fighting. Not everybody needs to be a black belt in jiu-jitsu. What's the right level of protection? What's the right level of preparation for your situation?
I'm not laughing at you. I was just thinking as you were talking, I used to jump off of our barn roof, my brothers and I, into this branch, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but the other day I did something, and it ended in a huge crashing noise. But there was this branch, this oak branch that had this Y in it, and it was about 20 feet off the ground, and you could launch off the end of the roof, and you would sail like 10 feet, falling off the gable, the top of a barn, the gambrel roof, and you would catch yourself in this branch, and then the branch was like 40 foot of this big bur oak tree, so it would spring down, but you had to bail when it was down, otherwise it would come back up and you'd be like 20 feet in the air. So it would spring about 8 feet from the ground, and you just bail and tumble into the lawn, and we smashed up the metal roof doing this, jumping off of it. Anyway, the other day I'm out here, you saw that chin-up bar that's out there in the shop, and I'm like, there was like some stuff on the floor. I'm like, I think I can just jump over that and grab the chin-up bar. And I'm like, 1, 2, 3, and I didn't go. And then all of a sudden I did. My daughter's here. And basically I fell on my ass, and she's like, what the hell did you just do? I'm like, I thought I could jump and catch it. It probably looked so stupid, and I probably, missed it by this much, but it was like, normally I wouldn't do that. But if I was up on that barn, I would not even think to jump and do it, right? Or like, a million things. I got my truck stuck one time up in the mountains in snow, and I look back and it's horrific. The whole story takes too long, but I risked other people's safety because of the snowy conditions, and I got out with a come along, literally pulling my truck in a ditch for about a quarter of a mile, ratcheting because the snow was just too deep.
Yeah.
And we were way up in the middle of nowhere. There was no cell phones, and looking back, like so stupid to take family up there in the snow. I was a 20-year-old. I would never. Now I'd be like, that's too stupid. The risk is not worth the fun going up there to do it. But
the thoughtfulness that you talked about, you reminded me of, we talk about our aging fathers, and it's been several years back, but my dad and I were out on a Saturday afternoon for lunch, and he's getting up there in age, right? We had a conversation, and another individual in the establishment was sitting several chairs down, overheard the conversation, inserted himself into the conversation. We were talking about family, and I think I was wearing a Chicago Bears polo at the time. And he made some comment about, me being a Cubs fan, which was instantly like it's a different logo. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And
you guys at like a restaurant or bar or something?
Yeah, like a bar. And the conversation, it was odd in that he sort of inserted himself. We weren't proximate. There wasn't a lot of people in the place, Saturday at lunchtime. And the conversation escalated to the point where he's like, well, I bet you think because you're bigger than me, that you'd be the one that'd win the fight. And I'm sitting there trying to figure out the best response to this. And my father looks up and he goes, my money'd be on the guy with the gun winning the fight. It's just like everybody went back to what they were doing. And you think, you know what? That was pretty sharp, right? Because it just killed, it was like,
yeah, that's the end of that. That's the end of that.
So I had to give Dad credit for just coming up with the right thing to say at the right moment to be able to kill the conversation and bring it back to, let's be reasonable people.
A well-timed phrase. How do if people listening, watching, want to get a hold of you, your organization, how do they do so?
CorporateSecurityAdvisors.com.
Spell it all out.
Yeah, CorporateSecurityAdvisors.com.
If they Google your name, they'll find you. You've done some written stuff, but you've also done some interviews like on Fox News and some things like that. They can find you there.
Yeah, the website has our contact information. My first initial J, my last name Baumann at csateam.com if you want to hit me up via email. I'm on LinkedIn.
All the old guys are.
Yeah, all the old guys are. I've got an Instagram account, but it's all, I typically post jujitsu pictures on
your pottery and craft making stuff.
My the very good coffee that I drink.
Good. I like that. Well done. Well done. I hope that you guys dug the conversation. We've kind of meandered through some stuff. My intention with asking him to come, besides wanting to share another one of my good friends with you, was I just thought there was a lot of information in that kind of a hyper-specific field, but it touches all of us every day. And the part that scares me about what you do is there are probably more companies, organizations, schools, whatever, that don't have people like you in the background doing stuff, and people leave things to chance and happenstance, and they just assume that, like I said earlier, somebody's doing stuff, which means you should ask questions. And I think that that's where we can leave it. What would your parting words be to folks?
Well, first off, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Very gracious of you to have me on. I always enjoy our conversations.
Same.
This one very much the same. For your listeners, the folks listening to this conversation, don't be good people and think about always going to people that you trust for advice, no matter what it is. And don't assume that you have all the answers. And if you have questions about something, reach out and ask. If you have questions about how to secure your organization or your business, we're happy to help. We don't charge to have a conversation with you to tell you if we can fix your problems or not. If you need expertise in firearms, they come to you, right? Find the experts in your life and use them for learning how to navigate. I was at a seminar yesterday and it was underscored. There's a whole set of solutions that I never even fathomed to problems that I commonly deal with. I thought the time to go seek out additional expertise in solving those problems is really I think the key to being successful in life. If you see a gap in your life, go find an expert, fill the gap with that expertise from people who've been there, done that.
Jeremy Baumann teaching us to plug holes. Be well. Don't be dickheads. Tell somebody you love them. Visit our website, carrytrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., Carry Trainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@carrytrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@carrytrainer.com or carrytrainer.com.